in environmental science and sustainable development. He will speak about dust haze in Iran, dust haze crisis in Iran. Thanks to all of you. Regarding human rights in Iran, we have a very short time. I will speak about things that have not been discussed earlier, including issue of dust, haze, that is actually that has invaded parts of our country. So I'll start with the definition of dust. It has been called differently in various countries. For example, in northeastern India, it's called habut. In Africa and Arabian countries, it's called phantom or devil. The storm that are caused by wind erosion are categorized. We have sandstorms and also dust storms. Sands are dust particles between 0.6 and 0.1, and dust is what is smaller than 0.6 diameter. But only those particles that are smaller than 0.1 can remain suspended in the air for a long time. And the source points of dust in Iran, the deserts are 90 million hectares in Iran. 16 hectares of grasslands are also desert grasslands, and they are exposed to dust, to wind erosion. 19.80 million hectares of Iran deserts are exposed to wind erosion, and human-made and man-made structures are exposed to the damage they create. So part of what this problem of dust haze can be attributed to the bad management of the government, and part of it to neighboring countries. 80% of this dust and haze come from foreign countries, from neighboring countries. From the lands, the deserts that come from Eastern Mediterranean to Iran, including in Mesopotamia, Arabia, and Eastern Syria. Sources of dust are in Saudi Arabia and Iraq are in the first place, and then Turkmenistan and UAE and certain Northern African countries are in this second source. Beforehand, the source was Arabia, and the substance of this dust was such that in 24 hours they were subsiding because the particles are very small, are bigger. But in Iraq, the particles that are coming from Iraq are bigger, and they subside in 1 week. In a research done by the GIS Center of the Tehran University, they have found 3 clusters of land as sources of this dust, and 1 point source as a secondary or enhancing source. Most of the dust comes from the cluster lands number 1. The second point source has created 14 cases of dust haze, and it is secondary in importance. The third source is in Rub al-Khali desert in Saudi Arabia, and it's one of the old sources of dust in the region of Middle East. It has an important role in the dust haze in Ahvaz, Abadan, and also in Greater Khuzestan. So the drying of Hurul Azim wetland has had an important role also in this problem, and the big storms that cover this land, they have also reached Tehran and central Iran sometimes. From eastern Syria, south and southwest Iraq have been second point source, and then they have been enhanced by the third point source. So I will summarize about the second source. I should say that I will mention two areas in the north of the Lake Tartar, Haditha Barrage. Around 923 square kilometers is the source. They have produced in this region more than 10 storms have been produced, and they have reached Iran. So we have a serious crisis in terms of haze dust. Al-Mosanna Desert, 200-kilometer distance from Khuzestan border. It's one of the main regions between 2001 and 2011. We have seen 11 storms, intensive storms during that time. So the effects are on the growth of plants, on deserts, on agriculture, on transportation, on human health. The most importantly, they have really serious effect on human health. Research done in New York University has proved that they have an important effect in incidence of cancer and pulmonary disease. Breathing this polluted air it results in the penetration of these polluted air into the lungs. It causes heart attacks. It also causes skin diseases. There is not only dust and sand there are also alkaline metals there, especially that there is even a probability that this dust that has reached Iran has even radioactive elements, because they have passed over regions that have been contaminated by chemicals. But for the moment there is no official report on this, and we need more research. The International Agency for Research on Cancer from WHO has categorized air pollution as a main source of disease in the world, and they have mentioned that more than 223,000 people die yearly because of air pollution. A researcher of this organization in Lyon in France, for the second time, Ahvaz has been selected as the most polluted city in the world, and it has provoked protests by the indigenous representatives of the city. More than 2,000 people have been received in the hospitals because of this pollution and acid rain. There are solutions proposed, for example, spreading mulch. Mulch is smelly and warm substance. It has bad effects on the environment. It is fragile, so people should not go over it, but this is not possible because of the conditions of life of the local population. Mulch is expensive, it requires high technology, and after 3 and 4 years they have no more effect. Professor Parviz Kardavani, for the first time in the world, has proposed a new method, which is spreading pebbles instead of mulch. Forestation can be another solution. Another solution would be actually dedicating enough budget and doing adequate research, and also awareness raising and upgrading the environmental culture of people through media, and also dedicating resources to medical care. We also propose that satellite meteorological and field meteorological systems should be upgraded. The environmental phenomena should be there should be enough planning and provision for environmental phenomena with the assistance of international organizations and institutions. Civilian and environmentalist activists should be freely monitoring the execution of private and government plans. Thanks to all of you.
با تشکر از دوستداران محیط زیست ایران، سودویند.